Well, you guys, thank you, everybody, so much for being here. I mean, really didn't expect everybody. I see old friends that I haven't seen in a while, so this is really kind of a gift for me to have this audience, this support. So thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for doing such a beautiful thing for this community. It's really touching. Like, when I was here setting this show up, and so many people would stop in and have just really close conversations with him, and you could just see kind of what a beacon he is for art and for this community. So I really want to thank him for that, providing a space for shows like this. And then my cousin James is back here documenting, photographing. My mom is here. Where are you, Mom? My mom is here. And, you know, this is mixed media work. And I often think about, because my mom is an artist, and growing up, she had a studio in her garage, in our garage, and she was doing these incredible wall tapestries, and actually had big shows in New York and Los Angeles. And so when I'm working, I'm kind of, I think about that, because her method of working was to take pieces of fabric that she had found that were beautiful in color and texture and just combine them in this way, and they would just start coming together in this kind of mythical paintings. I mean, not paintings, but three-dimensional works that filled up a whole wall. So my father was an artist too, and I'm actually going to be doing a slide presentation after we've done talking about my work, showing some of his work. And I had always thought, well, you know, I'm more influenced by my dad because I love faces, and I love capturing people's expressions, but more than their expressions, trying to relate and see myself in others. But I think in this way of working large and really of combining all these different elements, I draw a lot from my mom's example of just doing these massive amounts of work and these big pieces on the wall. I wish I had space to, I don't know, maybe do these all in fabric, but I'm just saying that. I really don't. But I arrived at this method of working on paper initially kind of as a space thing. I used to pretty much create on canvas, and I found I was just running out of room, so the paper I can kind of roll up. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the pieces, and then we're just going to open the floor to discussion, observations, and questions that anybody has about the work. And before I'm getting up here and talking, all of you are coming up to me individually and just giving me reactions to the work. And I know there are a lot of art lovers here and creative people, so it's also a nice forum to kind of get everybody can get their thoughts out there and kind of have a give and take. I want to start with Michael Brown here. And if you're not familiar, Michael Brown was the young man that was killed by police officers in Ferguson, Missouri. And unfortunately, he's one of a continuing stream of young black men that have been targeted by police. And so it's a kind of consciousness that, like, when I say we're all in this, there's many associations that we can have, but I can't forget, and I don't think any of us should forget, that we're in a beautiful day like today, and the sun is out shining off of the water, but we're also in an environment that is unfair and unjust depending on what your profile is. Dana and I, we live in West Oakland. We live in the lower bottom. These are our neighbors, you know. So you walk by young black men on the street, and society teaches us this is a threat. But in reality, I can practically walk up to anybody in my neighborhood and start a conversation and feel a connection. And that's not an exaggeration, really. These people posed for me. On the first initial meeting, this is the first time I met these people, and said, I would love to take a photo of you guys. And then now I see them in the neighborhood and say, hey, you know. But unfortunately, in our society, that's part of what all of this is we have places and we have mindsets where, like these young men there, the musicians, where if you see that guy in the center with baggy pants and a hoodie, people will get suspicious and he might end up like Trayvon, you know. So that's part of like my consciousness of saying that, and I don't want it to be all like, okay, this is the whole reality. I kind of like, I wanted to see the beauty in a cross spectrum of people from San Francisco, from Oakland, but also a heart. You know, when I look at, this is my friend Elmore from down the street. When I look at the way he smiles, and when his sense of humor, you know, it just touches me. People touch me in a way that their personalities come across, and I'm trying to capture that in the portraits. So getting back, just kind of getting back briefly to the process, because I don't want to just me talk through the whole thing. I said I used to work primarily on canvas. I had all these canvases downstairs, and I don't have a car big enough to fit that kind of a canvas in it. But I wanted to do something, you know, with that content, like in memory of Michael Brown and, by extension, Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, and what's his name? And Sean Scott, is that his name? And Walter Scott, yeah. So I go to Home Depot, and I had just started to paint this, but I had it precariously propped up because I didn't have clamps in the back. So I'm painting it, and it falls down, and you get oil paint rubbing on your clothes and everything. And so I go to Home Depot, and there's a protest going on. Home Depot is closed. Turns out a woman had shoplifted there. Security came. I'm not sure all the details of the story, but unarmed, ended up dead on the street, shot dead on the street, a shoplifter. I remember running by Home Depot with my dog on the day that had happened and hearing about it. And so I'm talking to one of the protesters, and I say, what's going on? And he tells me, and I forgot the name that she had, and so I'm like, well, I'm going to Archer at Hardware Supply because I'm not going to shop at Home Depot. But in the course of that conversation, we were talking about this list of young black lives that had been taken by police and how this disturbing trend. And he came up with the term, we're all in this, which was already in my head. Who came up with it? Well, he didn't come up with it. He had said it. I mean, it was already, I had already made and titled this book. By the way, this is Glenn Hirsch, and he's a mentor to me. I've been taking his classes at San Francisco Art Institute and at UC Berkeley Extension for years now, and he's been such an inspiration in helping me find my voice as an artist. And And really, that's it. I mean, yes, technically speaking, he has all the information to help me brighten and tighten up and present my work, but it's almost like it's more about finding the voice. And so I had done this work, and I was about to start his class for another semester, and I wanted to bring in something to sort of impress him, show him what I'd been doing. Yeah, so I took an atlas. Because for one thing, you're always like tired of shelling out money at Blick's Art Supply, you know? I can't even walk by there without $60 jumping out of my pocket, you know? I mean, I go in for a Sharpie, and it's going to end up costing me $60 because that's just the way it works. So I got this atlas, and I started working in Sumi ink. And I started doing these faces in it. And I went through it. And Glenn borrowed it. He said, "Can I borrow this?" And he photographed each one of these. This is like 108. And so I had this book at the time that I went to Home Depot to get these clamps, and I'm having the conversation about this police killing, and the guys, and I said, "Man, this is just such a tragedy. This affects all of us," or something like that. And he says, "We're all in this." At the time, I was planning on titling this show, "It's Time to Shine." And the reason is that my boxing trainer, Coach D, who I love, and he's like my Glenn Hirsch for exercise, you know. Seriously. And I wish he had been here today, but he's got to come all the way up from Gilroy. And so that phrase, "It's time to shine," really stuck in my head. But that conversation at Home Depot is what changed it to "We're all in this." And I'll leave this book around if people want to kind of go through it. As a matter of fact, I kind of want to open the floor. I want to say one more thing. Another West Oakland artist, Danny Ayala, he and I collaborated on a mural recently. Yeah. And Bob, come up here. You and your wife, come on up here, because there you are. Here they are, representing. You haven't seen this yet, no?
Come and shake his hand.
You recognize that guy? Thank you for coming, man. Glad you made it.
Jerry couldn't make it.
Jerry couldn't make it, I understand. And this is Jerry, my neighbor also, but he recently had a death in the family, so he's rather distraught. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. Yeah, so I guess that's really a rather long introduction. I'd really like, I love the way Glenn talks about art. So I'm going to put him on the spotlight and sort of have him open the floor to a give and take amongst all you creative people. Oh. And if you want to pass that around.
I just want to start with
You like it? Wait, we gotta do that.
We usually end each of our classes with what we call a crit, short for critique, which is kind of like a celebration and a party at the same time. It's a chance for people to talk about the art. And can you imagine what a pleasure it is to teach someone like him? Really. I mean, I'm kind of in a way more like your trainer than your teacher, in the sense that you're teaching yourself. And I'm helping you give birth to this work, which I've had the privilege of seeing evolve over the past 6 years or 5 years, something like that.
Maybe 6 years. Yeah.
The first time I think I met you and saw your work, you did an installation in response to Oscar Grant, right? So how many years ago was that?
That was about maybe when was Oscar Grant? 2009?
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
what
So yeah, I guess it was.
yeah.
I guess it was that many years ago. Yeah.
So, there's so much to talk about with the work in this gallery. First of all, the subject matter is so strong that you end up talking about the people and not the art, really. So in that way, it's kind of like literature. He's creating these characters, and you know, he knows them, they're real people, but he's not intending them to be portraits in the traditional sense. He's using them as part of the, we're all in this story. And we had a nice conversation one night about Jack Kerouac. And remember, what did you say that night?
Well, I know that you often, when we're talking about our work, and you mention that it's very literary to you, like I'm casting, like I'm seeing and noticing and almost writing out characters. And you had asked me, yeah, I like On the Road was really hooked me because of sort of the reality and the energy and the grit of these characters that were making mistakes and living life. And that's one thing that I kind of equate that with the way I'm working, is like, and the way Glenn teaches is like, try it out, make mistakes,
And
see what happens, discover what happens.
You also mentioned jazz.
Yeah.
And what did you mean by that? Why did you bring that as well?
It's just, it's music, you know, you get
It's
into a
music
zone.
that is improvised and doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that element of the work, which you really talked a lot about, and the fact that it's both personal and portraits on the one hand, and about bigger social issues, unfortunately, timeless social issues, and that are universal. I wish I could say they're just in America, but it's everywhere. And then there's the art. Why aren't we looking at photographs? What is it about this experience that's different because of what? What is it? Why does the work look so good when you walk in the room? What would be the difference between this approach to making these images and bringing these people to life with traditional oil on canvas? I mean, it would still be cool, right? But why this? What's different about it?
It's grittier.
What?
It's grittier.
It's grittier, yes, absolutely. You're always
Like that
rewarded
one,
when you
right.
put your nose in one of these with some surprise. Like, you know, I get up close to this one, to the lips and the caked oil paint and everything, and what do I see? A candy wrapper. So the subtext is gritty, but it's kind of fun, actually. Now, you started off by talking about really weighty subjects. I think there's nothing more tragic than tragedy, which is the murder of all these people. It's tragic, and yet at the same time, it's kind of fun in here. So how is it that art can get away with that? Is it disrespectful of the gravity of the situation we're all in to have fun with it this way? How is this work still respectful of the subject matter at the same time that he put a candy wrapper there?
I think because there's empathy.
Thank you. God, this is great group. You want to come to our crits? Yeah, empathy. Empathy is not pity. You identify with somebody when you have empathy.
Wow.
What?
He's a plant.
So what is it about this work that creates empathy then? What is it? Can you put your finger on it?
Expressive.
What?
Incredibly expressive and evocative.
And how does he do that? What's this tool? Why does the art do that? Again, we're kind of mind tripping about what if this was an exhibition of photographs? It would still be really cool, but what's the difference?
So he really sees things. You know, you walk through life and things go by you and you don't really see them, he really sees them.
It's also, it's handmade, the humanness of making things by hand. There's nothing between us and the image, no technology,
And no budget,
and just
yeah.
the fact that you have observed it, and you have put it down, and it's somehow more real than any photograph, than a photograph could be.
Well, it's also because there's so much variety and everything, that your mind, each one of us, is filling in a lot of detail.
Oh, good one, yeah. Yeah. It's more participatory.
I think it's like an architecture because he's building it up. Like he's adding more papers.
So more
and
layers of meaning to it.
it's not just layers, I mean physically. It's beyond a painting. It's also that he's building it, you know what I mean? So the shape and the weird shapes and the way he keeps adding on to it, not just layers, I mean size-wise as well.
And in that regard, he's made a decision not to present these all nailed down and flat against the wall. They're all flopping away and hanging. Does that help what you're saying, do you think?
Absolutely, that's what I.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about that. Because I spoke with you guys about the process and how I arrived at the physical process of these. You know, moving on from a canvas, and I mentioned that, well, I like to work large, but I couldn't transport canvases the size that I have. I was limited to the size of my hatchback for one thing, and then storage options for another. But if I might, I brought a few pieces that when I was casting for this show, they didn't quite make the cut, not because I didn't think they were ready, just because I had to see what worked with what. But you can kind of see a process of constructing a drawing. Uh-oh. You kind of see the bones. Oh, well, this one I backed, so that doesn't do me any good. Oh, here we go. This one shows a lot of the under pages, yeah, in the page, which I liked. But then we have, I was working on these and they stuck together. No. You're blowing my wrap, man. Okay, I'll deal with that later. But this one here, you can see these are all separate pages from a book. Okay? So I did her face with a Sharpie. And this person works at the gym I work at, and she has like the sweetest smile. I mean, it's just that could melt any ice, you know. It's just such a genuine person. So I got a book, and I open a book like this. This is someone that was at the opening last week. So that's how I start, right? And then I'll do her hands, and Jeff told me they all have to have shoes so that we can sell more shoes. So I'll do the shoes. Not true. So I lay it on the floor, and there's the head, and then I'll put the feet here, and I'll tear out some more pages and glue together. And then when it's ready, I'll put it up on the wall and finish it off. So that's kind of what you're talking about. That's the process.
How selective are you about what goes as the foundation for these? Do you put any thought or care what's on
It varies. This bike messenger is a bit of a self-portrait, by the way. I love the browns there in the background because they work as a background behind his arm. I love the grays because they're gritty, they're the city, they work. And so I'm just really kind of looking for color and pattern that works. And then I backed it on a unifying piece here to sort of just kind of hold it all together. And then I was aware that it created this interesting sculpture-like shape with the fold there and creates interesting shadows. Or like the homeless person here, rather than trim it up and make it all kind of gallery presentable, I love the shadow. I love the curl. I love the folds.
Well, here's what I was referring to, because right perfectly placed above the figure is crouching beneath the word, introduction.
Yeah.
So if we talk about these as literature and narrative, then there's the introduction. I mean, did you do that ahead of time, or that just happened, that word?
Well, this would be on the original page where I drew his face. And so I was looking for a couple things. On that face, I just wanted print. I didn't want a lot of color or texture in the background, so I wanted print like that. But seeing the introduction there, I definitely spared it because it's evocative. Introduction, can you elucidate on that? I don't know. Can you? You know, that it's sort of an invitation. What does that mean? So I like to leave little pieces like that. Or in Elmar over there, who I am very proud of those plastic bags because they look to me like plastic bags. But you can see that I left the American flag under his left knee. Did I think beforehand, I need to have an American flag on his left knee? Probably not, but when I came across it, I said, yeah, he's getting an American flag. I'm not sure where it's going to be, but it's going to end up showing through somewhere. So that's kind of the visual poetry of it. Is like it's not, there's not a template for it. You know, there's a finding your way as you build it, as you draw it. There's a finding your way and say, I like that. You know, kind of, yeah. Jazz-like. Someone else mentioned that.
You gotta love how indelicate the subjects are real, and life's not delicate, and life's hard, and everyone's got real issues to deal with. And I just love the fact that there are curls and rips and tears, and the way you treat your art is not like it's meant to be protected forever. The subjects all have real life to deal with, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So when the materials are rather fragile, it makes you think that way about the characters.
Yeah.
Up to about 18 months ago, correct me if I'm wrong, the people in Eric's work were never smiling. And I used to tease him about it. And then I come to this show, and a lot of people are smiling. And do you want to say anything about that? Is there anything to say?
Yeah, actually I do, in that because there's sort of what you see here is actually two stretches of doing work. And if you look at this wall, up through this guy, and then I guess these two are from last year. And my visual references were a little bit, I was using references that were a little bit more impersonal. These are all people on the streets in San Francisco. So I'm snapping people as they pass by. And if you can see, she's kind of glaring at me. She caught me, right? It's like, what are you taking my photo? So they're not smiling. And I think starting with some of these, like him, I was out at Lake Merritt, and he's got this, Jeff, have you seen, with the gold bicycle, and he's got a gold, it's actually a tricycle, a gold, and a trailer, and it's probably 90 degrees out there, and he's wearing that hat and that coat. And he's just bopping by, and he's got music going on in the trailer. And I got into a conversation with him. I think he sold me a street sheet. And I said, man, I'd really love to do your portrait. And naturally, when you start talking to people, they open up and they'll smile at you. And so that's kind of what Bob, he's always smiling at me, man. I can't walk out of the house, hey, Bob. Because, and I got to say, look, Dana and I moved into 16th Street 4 years ago.
September 2010, yes, a little bit more.
Yeah. And so he was like one of the first neighbors that I met. It kind of gave me the whole lowdown on, if you guys have questions, ask Bob. Especially about Oakland or anywhere in California, because you've driven everywhere, right? So yeah, that's kind of why people are smiling now. Is I'm more engaging with them personally. I mean, even to the point where this guy's a complete stranger, and I saw he had that cool hat and he had tattoos on his neck, and he just looked like a guy who's seen a lot, lived a lot, and I connect with that. And so I asked him if I could do a portrait of him.
Another vehicle that this work uses to express empathy is gesture, body language. The whole room is full of really interesting body language. You can almost imagine these as a series of silhouettes, and some of the same feeling that still come across. I also want to say something for, even with all the mixed media hoopla, I want to say something for your incredible skill and grace as a draftsman. Because drawing, just beautiful drawing, to me is like music on an acoustic instrument. You know, you can hear electronic music and it's all really cool, but to hear someone playing a violin, there's something about it. Lee, when you said people working with their hands unmediated by technology. So just the beauty of Eric's line, his drawing, it comes across really well in the books because there isn't a lot of other mixed media in addition to drawing there. It's very classical. It's something that people in the Renaissance would understand. I think that's part of the kind of dignity and empathy that comes to us with this work is the skill of drawing. Did you want to say anything about the bird?
Oh, yeah. One of the things about the bird is I've been completely in love with the art of Romare Bearden, if any of you are familiar. And through a lot of just frustrating attempts, I realized the ability to copy him would be the ability to talk, look, and speak exactly like him. It's not about that, but his influence in collage is one thing, although it plays out much differently in my work, if you're familiar with his. But one thing I have is a beautiful monograph of his work, and I was reading an interview, and he was talking about the meaning of birds in his work as a spiritual signifier. And I brought this to class at the Art Institute, and we were talking about it, and then somebody said, "What about the bird?" And everybody said, "There's a bird?" right there. And then I thought, well, I'd really like to have another bird. And this was the day after I had installed everything. So I thought, yeah, this is all street. Let me get a pigeon in there. And so when I put the pigeon up there, I was going to tack it down, but I looked at it and I thought, no, it's flying now, one tack, and it's kind of animated. Yeah. So that's the bird.
So it just brings up something else that's really nice about this show. It's how it's installed. The way that, first of all, the way that Jeff uses this space as an absolutely unique space for art, and then the way you hung the show, including his choice to paint the wall black.
That was Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
But the whole thing, even though the work is going to live on past the date of the show, this is a very unique event, and so installation is a really good part of it. Did you want to show the slides of your?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're going to do it
Yeah.
all?
Yeah. Okay, guys. So as I mentioned, my mom, I saw examples of how she worked and worked large and put all these beautiful pieces together. My dad was a very, very, very skilled artist, and I want to talk about his work a little bit. Okay, this is an example of how I was working before I let the independent figures kind of bust out of the frame on their own. Because this is all one piece. Now, it's pieced together, it's collaged, drawn and painted. It's pieced together on one big backing. So it makes for a big piece, and I have so many of these that make a big rolls in my house. Last year, this wall behind all of us, I did one giant mural all on paper in this fashion. And that was kind of a point at which I thought, well, you know what? I can't keep making big pieces like this. I'm going to run out of space. This was actually a class assignment of a class I had with Glenn on exploring the portrait and self-portrait. And this piece is a self-portrait in a dream. But this was an actual dream that I had back in the 70s that was very, very lucid. It was one of those dreams that when you wake up, your pulse is racing because you know the dream is telling you something very significant. And the nature of the dream was somber, and it came across that I was being told of a prediction of a death in my family of someone very important to me. And I had interpreted it as my grandfather, my mother's father. I was anticipating somehow, even though he was in good health, that he would pass. Well, about a month after this dream, after it was out of my mind, the very atmosphere that I found myself in was with a friend at the beach, and all of a sudden the whole atmosphere changed, and I realized that I was in the dream. And I was like tears were coming to my eyes. I was anticipating. I knew something was happening. As we were exiting the beach, it was Carmel Beach, so if you've been there, you know that you walk up this big sand hill. Just as in the dream, my mom, my stepfather, and my brother, and I think my sister, were up there waiting to talk to me, just as in the dream. So I knew, I was shivering. Wow. And they told me that my father had passed, actually had been killed. This was 1977. I was 19 years old. I did not grow up with my father, but I grew up with always a sort of internal connection to him. One aspect of that is that he and I are very similar looking facially. The other aspect is that he was an artist and I was always drawn. And that I grew up missing having a dad. I grew up missing that half of my identity, that half of myself, and that half of my heritage. And then I would never get that opportunity after that. So, but I did, in a way, because I've been going to family reunions, Jordan family reunions, since 2003 now, and getting that connection to this part of my where I'm from. So this is an introduction, sort of, to the work of my father, and then now we'll, yeah, that's a close up. And that's DeWitt Jordan. That's my dad. He's in West Helena, Arkansas. I have a beautiful print of this. I had gone down to West Helena, and this was in the local photographer's shop. There was a photographer down there who documents African American life in and around West Helena, and this was in his window. Just like, whoa, this print that's my dad. And went and bought that. He's a young man here. Mom, how old? 20, 25?
No, yeah, he was maybe late 20s.
You can see the mastery. And he was, I'm not going to speak scholarly or academically, just what I know. My connection is not that of someone who's a scholar of DeWitt Jordan so much. But he emulated Rembrandt. He wanted to paint like that, the chiaroscuro. He was a very, very adept oil painter. But from where? Where's the big classical art school in West Helena, Arkansas? A little blues town on the banks of the Mississippi River. So largely self-taught. And he came up to the Bay Area to continue his studies and to go to California College of Arts and Crafts, right? And he and my mom met, had my brother and I. Marriage didn't last. Let's move on. Beautiful drawings. And again, you can see there's his influence. So you can see the similarity, that looking at the shadows and the light emerging from the dark. And then, of course, subject matter, just people. And looking for the heart and the soul and the beauty of his subjects. Okay, this is a friend of his, George Hunt, who's a very accomplished artist and very, very well known, and more influenced by the likes of Picasso and Cubism. And and they were very good friends. George Hunt taught, maybe still does, I don't think he still does it, but at Tennessee, I think it's University of Tennessee or Tennessee State University in Memphis. And my dad and he would just, he was part of his group of fellow artists. And my dad would drop in on his classes and help teach sometimes. He couldn't teach officially because he didn't have a MFA. Another beautiful, yeah. Down there in blues country. And there's a similar subject matter. You can see it different in styles. My dad, really concerned with realism, but that heightened drama and that animation and that feeling and character. This is a large painting, Birth of the Blues. This is on permanent display in the Bank of Tennessee in downtown Memphis, along with some other murals. And he was very, very proud of this being one of his strongest paintings. There he is. There's a portrait of Martin Luther King. Easily $15,000 a year. What would you do with that kind of money? Buy a lot of shoes from Jeff.
What year is that photo?
Any idea, Mom? 60s.
Yeah, well, he was in the Martin Luther King March.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he after leaving the Bay Area and then briefly in Los Angeles, he went back down south and lived and worked in Memphis. The sharecropper, he did a lot of those. And those paintings were for the, I think the Memphis Opera, just for the stage setting. He did. There's another one from the opera. Oh yeah, this is another style. I guess in the art world, they called Thomas Hart Benton a regional style because he's not a New York artist, but a very wonderful muralist. And I included this in here because it really, the animation and the drama really reminded me, and the rural subject matter reminded me a lot of my dad's work. And you can see the similarity with the gesture, the animation, the subject matter. And these shacks, shotgun shacks, a lot of them around there in Helena, Tunica. Where's that we stayed, Dana? We stayed at the Tunica Roadhouse last time we were down there, which is where George Hunt was from. Yeah, so he's really like looking at compassion and humanity and trying to get into raw emotion. And he was a person that my relatives always have stories about what a character he was, in the way of somebody that really engages people, that is very colorful and engaging. And one story was his cousin Fred Jordan, who he hung out with a lot. And they'd go out clubbing, they'd go to the juke joints and stuff. And he was with Fred Jordan, and they saw these guys at the table, like this group of Marines. And for some reason, my dad, he was just being of a visual nature, always wanting to paint people, came up to this guy and started like putting his hands on the guy's head. And Fred's like, DeWitt, man, this is a group of Marines. He's trying to get our asses kicked. But I mean, that's kind of like, he ended up just sort of saying, hey, man, I love the way the light falls on your head. I want to paint it, you know. So this is kind of like one of the many sort of eccentric kind of stories that people filled me with. Like when I first came around to the Jordan family reunions, everybody would pull me aside and tell me a story about my dad and sort of what a character he was like that. Driving around there, like Elena, you're on these, they're beautiful backcountry roads, and cotton field after cotton field, and you look and see some broken down shack with like 20 rusted cars in the front and an old hound dog, you know, like that. These rural scenes like that. And so that's what he painted. He painted his surroundings and the people in his surroundings. This is the Cotton Landing. Helena was a small port town and it was also like one of the birthplaces of the blues music. It's in the Delta. And so this is a scene probably of Memphis in the old days, and one of the old riverboats offloading. And this is a beautifully painted, it's very large. You can't really see the type of detail in there too well, but just the animation of the people. The guys unloading that bale of cotton and the way the guy's back is bent and glistening like that. And then the whatever, you know, whether they be plantation owners or whatever in the center, you know, just standing, overseeing, all arrogant. And I don't remember seeing this one. This kind of explains something to me. My mom and Dana and I, it was a beautiful day, and we walked out on the Berkeley Pier, and I read in a plaque that pier had originally gone out 3.5 miles. And it would probably look like this as a working pier, you know? This is, this mural would fill Jeff's wall back here, but all beautifully layered and detailed, oil painted. This is the history of Memphis. And so it has people that would be recognizable in, or maybe it's the history of Tennessee, I'm not sure which. One summer, it might have been like 1968, I went down there, my brother and I, for a month and stayed with my dad. And he took us around. It was a real treat for me, you know. He'd come over and we'd throw the baseball, and he'd take us for a Sunday drive, and he took us down to Memphis and showed us this mural in process. So again, this is a very large mural. These kids on the bottom, one of which was my sister Cynthia was the model. She was a little girl at the time. And so that's it.
All right, well, let's give Eric a hand for this.